I know. Typically, Mondays are all about the previous game of the week. However, when you have a victory like the one that Grambling had over Jackson State, plans change. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your numero uno, number one daily stop shop, daily one-stop shop. Spanish is not my stuff. Your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, aka the Mouth of the South. I'm just here to have fun. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a big statement, in my opinion, but it's going to be a kind of a vague look. It's going to be a broad look. But I believe that this is the best non-conference week of HBCU football that we will see the entirety of the season, or we have seen, because next week is SWAC play. And then I also believe that it will end as a top 3 to 5 week of HBCU football, period. So I want to back up that claim in segment 3. In segment 1 and 2, it's all about Grambling beating Jackson State. This was a big time game. It was one that I teetered about and kind of, I was on the fence on whether or not I was going to make this the game of the week. Obviously, it wasn't. But the way that it all went down, it gets the Monday slot. It gets the typical game of the week recap slot that we'll give Hampton and Howard, but we'll be back with that tomorrow. So in segment 2, we'll take a look at Grambling's running game. I'll probably also try to tiptoe a little bit into Jackson State's quarterbacks because we have such a stacked week that I don't want to overlook them, but I think they need to be talked about. So they'll probably be all in segment 2. But segment 1 is all about the Grambling defense because Grambling's defense has done it again. There is no school in all of FCS football. I don't care if it's SWAC. I don't care if it's MEAC. I don't care if it's Big Sky, CAA. Doesn't matter. There is no school in FCS football who is better at forcing turnovers through 4 games than the Grambling Tigers. They have 15 that leads the nation. And I know they've forced a turnover in every single game, but over the last 2 weeks, that's when it's really ratcheted up. They've had 11 turnovers over the last 2 weeks. I say it. Grambling's done it again because against Texas A&M Commerce, they forced 6 turnovers. And I remember somebody in my comments saying that can't happen again. You're right. They forced 5 against Jackson State. But in my opinion, they got robbed for one of them, and it should have been 6, and that ended up leading to a Jackson State touchdown. So Jackson State, in my opinion, lost this game because Grambling's defense was so effective at forcing turnovers. But here's the thing. Not only can Grambling force turnovers, they know how to turn them into points. They don't want to give the offense the chance to squander anything. They don't want to give the offense a chance to get field goals. No. Grambling State knows how to turn turnovers into points because their defense says we'll go score. Of the 15 turnovers, 4 of them have been returned for touchdowns. The beautiful part about Grambling's defense and their ability to force turnovers is that it's not as if they're just one-dimensional in their turnovers. First off, no one would care. If you had 15 interceptions, no one's saying, well, technically, they didn't have any fumbles forced. They didn't recover any fumbles. No one's saying that. 15 turnovers are 15 turnovers. No one cares how you got them. It's just about the fact that you did get them. However, Grambling is forcing fumbles and they're getting interceptions. To me, that is a great sign of how multiple that their defense is, right? Because you see linebackers getting interceptions. You get defensive backs picking up fumbles. To me, this is a fantastic display. And this immediately puts them in that upper echelon of the SWAC West. I still have some questions about their offense. I still have some things I'm looking for out of them. But the defense forcing turnovers the way that they are, upper echelon. And I know what you may think. Forcing turnovers the way that they are, Mouth of the South, that's not going to continue. Bingo. It's not going to continue. 5 turnovers a game, 6 turnovers a game. That's not happening. But what about 2? What about one? Now, at this point, with Grambling leading the nation in turnovers through 4 games, you have to assume that at any moment, that defense can force a turnover, whether that's in their own territory, whether that's backing with the offense backed up against their own goal line, whether that's them looking to score. You have to understand that at any moment, the Grambling defense is a threat to cause a turnover. Because if an offense had 15 turnovers up to this point, we would say no matter what happened through the remainder of the season, no matter what happened, we would say we know that they can give it up one time. It don't matter. At any moment, they could give that up. Why wouldn't we give that same credit? Why wouldn't we give that same praise? Why we wouldn't give that same boost to the defense? We can't hype up negativity and then kind of not submerge, I guess submerge, it works. It's not the word I'm looking for, but submerge positivity, right? We're not going to try to sit here for 5 minutes as I try to figure out which word in the dictionary that I'm trying to say. If I remember it throughout the rest of the show, I, I'll say it. But anyway, you can't do that, But let's get into the turnovers, right? Let's get into converting it for points. Last week they had 1 touchdown. This week they had 2. I thought that Grambling's offense did a poor job of turning turnovers into points against Texas A&M Commerce. That was of everything, that was my biggest gripe, is that the defense gave you time after time after time, right? And you kept not, or chance after chance after chance, and you just kept not delivering. That was an issue for me, right? But Grambling ends up getting that interception in OT, and cool. This week, they didn't give them that chance, right? They did miss a field goal on a turnover, but other than that, let's see. I 2 of the turnovers Grambling scored on. One of the turnovers was a missed field goal, and then another turnover was a field goal. Actually, I think the next 2, one second. Excuse me. Actually, I think they turned 2 turnovers into points offensively, 1 missed field goal, and then 2 touchdowns defensively. So this was a very productive output when it comes to the defense. And I want to highlight, because there are some players who were repeat offenders from last week. Caleb Lee Collins, Patrick Marshall. They both scored touchdowns. Marshall's on the fumble, and then Lee Collins is on the interception. They both had turnovers last week. So did Brendan Barley. Brendan Barley was a repeat offender from last week's game. And actually, I want to highlight these linebackers, because you have Brendan Barley, who had an interception, and they were good coverage interceptions, might I add. They were good coverage interceptions. Felt as if he was reading the quarterback eyes. And then on Jackson State, he was present. It was a bad throw, but that could have been camera angle. Brendan Barley, on both of his interceptions, looked like he was poised, and he also looked like he was skilled in coverage, skilled in reading the quarterback. Whatever it was, it didn't look like a typical linebacker interception. This looked like a quality play by a linebacker. However, I also want to highlight his running mate. Andrew Jones didn't have any turnovers in this game, but all you saw was him around the field. For the 3rd consecutive week, Andrew Jones has 11 tackles or more, and he also has 2 tackles for a loss. Right? He had a sack in this game. He didn't have one against Texas A&M Commerce, but he had half a sack the week before. Through the first 4 games, he has 38 tackles, I believe. Andrew Jones against Jackson State, you seen him attacking Cam McCoy before he got hurt. You saw him running sideline to sideline. You saw everything that you wanted from that linebacker. I genuinely enjoyed watching him play. And if you just go watch the game, don't look up who Andrew Jones is, and I promise you'll see 6 in gold. And you'll say, who's that? It's Andrew Jones. He makes an impact. You saw it. He was the defensive player of the week last week. I don't know if he gets it this week, because some of his running mates had touchdowns, so he may be competing with his own squad. But this guy has been playing at a high level for the last 2 weeks. Just an all-around really good performance by Grambling's defense. I know that they had their troubles with some explosive plays, but I thought that if Grambling didn't get an explosive play, I didn't really think that they had great offense. They now, granted, they did get a good amount of explosive plays. So if you can do them consistently, have at it. But I thought that Grambling, for the most part, when they forced Jackson State to be methodical, when they forced Jackson State to go play after play after play, they didn't do a good job with that. And I think outside of Outside of a few explosive plays that led to touchdowns almost immediately, it's a good performance by Grambling, especially when you put in the turnovers. A+. Now, as you push forward, let's look at the other side of Grambling. Let's look at the Grambling State running backs, because I told you this was a big test for Jackson State's run defense. How did they do? We'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the NFL season is here. I'm sorry for everybody who didn't do what I said and y'all missed the 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Well, that's gone. We have a new boost for you. Anybody, existing, old, new, just coming in, we have a new deal for you. You get $200 back in bonus bets just for putting down a $5 bet. It's just that simple. It pays off for you very quick, very easy. So you go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. You go ahead and put some money down on the NFL, the NBA, the WNBA playoffs started on Sunday. The MLB is still active. I got to get back to a Rangers game. You put money on any of that. So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That is FanDuel.com/locked on. And by putting down a $5 bet, whether you're new or if you're existing, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Saints. Y'all see I still got the shirt on. Pride ain't low. I still got the crest behind me. Still repping my team. Come on, man. Y'all know what it is. And Grambling Southern got the victories for the state. So it is what it is. But yeah, let's look at this Grambling victory. And let me stop trying to quote Instagram videos that I recently saw. But Grambling's running backs. I thought that Grambling's running backs would pose a decent challenge for Jackson State. And I remember hearing them. They can't run. It's funny to me. And I'm not going to keep calling back to Jackson State. But what I will say is I felt as if this was going to be a good game. And I felt as if some JSU fans were a tad bit dismissive of Grambling in my comments. That was funny to me. Because I wasn't dismissing them, right? I was in here. And it's only funny because it felt like kind of a criticism of my work, which I can accept. But they laughed at Grambling, and that stuck out to me. Dismissed the Grambling's ability to run the football. Do I think that Grambling ran the ball phenomenally? No. Did I walk away discouraged with Jackson State's running game or run defense? No. But what I will say is I thought that Bull Hargrove ran the ball effectively. I also thought that Trey Bradford ran the ball better than his stats say at the end of the game. I'm not saying that they bulldozers wasn't a manhandling, but it was the test that I thought it would be. And here's the thing about Grambling. Their offense hit a complete wall between the second and fourth quarter. So quarter 2 and quarter 3. In that point, they kind of got away from the run. And I didn't think that Trey Bradford had as good of a game as Bull Hargrove. I thought it was a noticeable difference when those two were in the backfield. Noticeable difference. Let's look at these numbers, though. Let's look at the numbers for Bull Hargrove and then also Trey Bradford, who are the lead guys. And one thing that I did say about this running tandem is that either one of them could have a good game. Hargrove had a good game against Louisiana. He had a good game against Louisiana. And then you're looking at Trey Bradford, who had a good game against Tuskegee and then also against Texas A&M Commerce. Either one of these guys could have done something. In this game, it was Bull Hargrove. Hargrove had 16 carries for 81 yards, which equals out to 5.1 a pop. But that doesn't take into account for the fact that he had a couple of goal line runs. It doesn't take into account for that. I thought he had some goal line runs that really knocked down his yards per carry. And he could have been at 6.5, to be honest. He was very efficient. I thought he was really good in the one cut. How am I trying to say? It's not one cut system, but when he was making one cut, planting his foot and just getting downhill, that's when I thought he was the best. I thought he hit the gaps. I thought he hit the holes harder than Bradford. I thought that he did a better job fighting through contact. I thought he did a better job not allowing contact to hit him head on. This was a really good game by Bradford. And somebody said they didn't even run for 100 yards against Tuskegee. And I don't know. Did they run for 100 yards in this game? 104. So they were very close. Now, part of that is sack numbers, to be honest, but all in all, 104. It wasn't about the 104. It's about how it felt. It was about how that's what led them down the field when they did score points offensively. You had a big throw by Miles Crawley on, I believe, the last touchdown drive that they had, but it ended up being punched in on the ground, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes you can kind of put what's it called? No, that I'm not messing that up because Grambling's defense scored the third and fourth touchdown. So no, on that last touchdown drive, Miles Crawley had a big time throw, but you look at a guy like Bull Hargrove who punched it in. As far as I would say you kind of passed. I would say you kind of passed. I wouldn't say fully, and I wouldn't say you failed. It was a good test. I walked away feeling decently about both Grambling's rush defense or rush offense, and then also Jackson State's rush defense. So just to highlight the one storyline that I did highlight before the game, the ability to stop the run. But for Jackson State, I want to highlight that too. Jackson State ran the ball really well. Travis Terrell looks explosive. He looks like absolute dynamite, right? You put the ball in his hand and you feel like, okay, this could be a touchdown from anywhere from the 1 yard line all the way to the other 1 yard line. And so I like what I've seen from Travis Terrell. Irv Mulligan still looks really good. I wish that he would have got more carries, but then again, they were playing from behind and they have a slew of running backs. So you can't give Terrell, Mulligan, and Martin 10 carries apiece. It's just not going to happen. Martin got 8. He went for 56 with absolutely no negative yardage. Travis Terrell had 5 for 45, no negative yardage. And you had Irv Mulligan, who had 7 yards, a loss, but he ended up being a net of 39. And that still 5.6. So you're looking at all three of your running backs averaging over 5 yards per carry. I thought that Mulligan, I still walk away impressed with him all the time. Just the way that he runs is so aggressive. It's so smooth, though. It's aggressively smooth, and I just enjoy watching him play football. As for the quarterbacks for Jackson State, I walked away with much to be desired when it came to the QB play. When it came down to the QB play, Cameron McCoy and then also Jacobian Morgan, they both saw the field. They both saw a decent amount of throws. You definitely saw more from McCoy as far as just pure volume. You seen more of it, but I wouldn't say that he was better than Morgan. It's one of those things where I now wonder how this is going to go. McCoy does give you the added benefit of having the run game, and he ended up having 8 for 20, but some of that is sack yardage that goes away for him. But like, he's a threat on the legs or a threat with his legs, but then also, he's a threat with his legs, but then at the same time, you have to understand that he can throw the ball. But I thought that both he and Morgan were too inconsistent. I thought that he and Morgan were very inconsistent with their ability to throw the rock. And I had a little bit of a problem with that. But anyway, I just got a tweet about something. I'll look at that when I finish. But it could look like it was a little bit of dirt. Huh. Can't read that right now. Definitely got to double check that information. But if it is, then we will be talking about it either tomorrow or Wednesday, probably Wednesday. But anyway, the point is Jackson State's quarterbacks, I thought that they weren't great. I thought that McCoy had too many off-target passes. Morgan had less, but he also threw the ball less. So I wanted more through the air for the quarterbacks from that game. I've said it before. I like Morgan. I've seen what I liked in the game against Louisiana Monroe, but I just want more. So that's what I'm looking at. Grambling's running backs, I think they passed the test. I think they looked good. I thought that Bradford had a bad yard per carry. Bradford had 2.3 yards per carry. That didn't feel right. I thought he ran way more effectively than 2 yards per carry. I'm not saying he looked like he was 8-9 yards per carry, but he definitely looked like it was more than 2 point something a pop. But then you had Bradford or you had Hargrove who came in with 5. So he wasn't as good as Hargrove. So I would say it felt like he was around 3.5, which was about what he was when you talking about positive yardage without the loss. But he was banging it too. I ain't gonna lie. So we'll see. But anyway, let's push forward and look at this stacked weekend. I think that this is the best weekend of college HBCU college football that we've seen. And I don't know how many more weeks going forward are going to top it. Let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the only place that I would tell you to go buy your tickets. I'm not telling you to go to Bleep or Bleep. I'm not saying them because they don't pay us. You're going to look at her Game Time, right? And then you can use my code Locked On College. You get $20 off your first purchase. It's simple. It doesn't matter if you want to go to a theater play. Doesn't matter if you want to go to a musical, if you want to go to a concert, you want to go to an NBA game when they come back. You want to go to a WNBA game because it's the playoffs. You want to go to a NFL game. Maybe you want to go to a boxing match. Maybe you want to go to the freaking circus. All of that is on Game Time. I can tell you that. I looked at it. I seen the tickets for the Universal Circus in Chicago. So doesn't matter where you are. You go and put your city there. They'll show you the local events and they'll give you the best deals possible. They have tickets that are available up to an hour after kickoff, after tip off, whatever the sport is, right? First pitch, all of that. So you go ahead and take advantage of that and you go to Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I think that this is the best weekend of HBCU football that we've seen all year. I genuinely do. From the entertainment factor, from the competition factor, from the there's one game, 1 to 3, depending on how you look at it, that had stakes involved. You could look at Howard and Hampton as stakes involved because it's a rivalry and it's the battle for the real HU. You could look at A&T versus Central as stakes involved because it was a rivalry. Like you could look at those things, but overall, there was only one game that impacts the end of the season, and that was Southern versus PV. I looked at this. I wish I would have came on here and said that I thought this was going to be the best week because I did feel it, but I didn't say it. But I did feel it, and nothing disappointed. You look at it on paper. On paper, Tennessee State's first conference game against Tennessee Tech, a team that Eddie George was 3-1 against, but now he's 3-2. Just the first conference game period. I don't care who it's going against, but that was a big deal to me. I'm looking at North Carolina A&T versus North Carolina Central, and I'm thinking about the rivalry. I didn't think this game would be close at all. I was right. This was a beatdown. Did I expect that kind of beatdown? No. I thought maybe they would get the belt out, but they went outside and got the switch. It was a different level of whipping, right? It was a whole different level than what I expected to see. That being said, it was a beatdown. Now, let's keep pushing. Jackson State versus Grambling. We just talked about this. I knew this would be a good game. I was invested. I was hyped for it. I'm looking at Texas Southern versus Lamar. You probably didn't think too much of it, but I did. All right. I told you I wanted to see what Texas Southern would do. I wanted to see if they could rise to the occasion. They did. I'm looking at Southern versus PV. That rose to the occasion. That was a big time game between two SWAC opponents. PV is on the ropes right now. I don't think PV can afford another loss. That's what we're talking about right now. I'm looking at Howard versus Hampton, the battle for the real HU. Hampton has a 7-game win streak. They upped it to 8. And then lastly, if you're really going to have the recipe, right, the recipe for a great weekend of football is to have the games you expect to be good. And then the games that maybe you didn't expect to rise up to the occasion as well. That's exactly what I got. Going into the week, A&T versus Central, Tennessee State's first conference game, Jackson State versus Grambling, Southern versus PV, Howard versus Hampton. I feel like that captivates the majority of our attention. TSU versus Lamar. Hey, a little bit of a homerism pick, but that's okay because I was still looking for something. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games right there that I had high expectations for, and every single one lived up to it. Not quite A&T versus Central, but I also expected Central to whoop them. So, 5.5. But then you have Clark versus Bethune-Cookman. The biggest upset of the year so far? I think that's pretty safe to say. We're going to be looking at Clark and the fact that it's a new era on Wednesday. There are so many storylines that came out of this weekend of HBCU football. I feel comfortable saying it is the best week of HBCU football we've seen this year. And when it's all said and done, I think it's going to be top 3. The fact that we were so thoroughly entertained with this week, whether it was Clark with a last-second field goal to go over Bethune, whether it was Jackson State versus Grambling, whether it was Southern versus PV going into overtime. Right? these were games that we were highly anticipating. We were entertained, even if the stakes weren't as high. Now, as we get into conference play, stakes will rise, and naturally, those games will probably be looked at in a different light. But as of right now, this is the best weekend of HBCU football in 2024. It's going to be very tough to top. I think that you're going to have to see games with higher stakes in order to do it, because simply quality of the game, I don't think so, man. A lot of these games were close, came down to the wire, or they just had very impactful and statement performances. I'll say it once. I say it probably 3, 4, 5 times now. I'll say it again. This was the best weekend of HBCU football that we've seen in 2024. And I genuinely don't think that too many weeks moving forward are going to go above it. Now, I appreciate you on tomorrow's episode, we'll be looking at Tennessee State and the fact that they were close with no cigar in a multitude of different ways, but then also look at a couple of players who I thought stood out. That would be probably segment 3. If it's not segment 1, it'd be one or the other. I'm not sure yet. But then the other two will be filled with Mason Smith, who was at the battle for the real HU, and he'll be breaking down Howard versus Hampton. And I can't wait. He told me he was at the game. I said, yes, because I couldn't get it on that Monumental Sports, whatever it was called. You can help me break down the box score and contextualize it because you were actually able to see it. So be ready for that on tomorrow's episode. It's a full slate. Then we'll come back on Wednesday. We'll be looking at Clark Atlanta and the fact that it's a new era. We'll probably look at PV versus Southern somewhere in there. It's a week. I'm telling you, it's a week of stacked action. I hope nothing breaks because I have a full slate of coverage. I have a full slate of coverage. So I need y'all to act right. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Tell the news cycle to act right, okay? In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.